Welcome to Testing 123, a podcast brought to you by TestGenius.
Well, welcome everybody to Testing 123. We're back after a hiatus and we're ready to start a new season. My name is Jenny Arnez. I'm one of your hosts today. Also with me is Mike Callen. Mike is one of our hosts and he's also the president of TestGenius. And today we're really excited because we have a special guest. We have Jocelyn King. Jocelyn is the CEO and founder of VirgilHR. Welcome, Jocelyn.
Thank you, Jenny and Michael. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, we're really glad you're here. I want to start with a question about the name VirgilHR. Can you give us a little bit of background about how you came up with that name for your company?
Yes, it's a very nerdy story, I must admit. I was a philosophy major in college. I did a thesis on Dante's Divine Comedies, like Dante's Inferno. And Virgil, who's a real life poet, he wrote the Aeneid, for example. He's a character in Dante's poem, and he's this beacon of wisdom and reason and rationality, and he guides Dante through hell, through purgatory, and up toward heaven. And I just thought, you know what? We do employment and labor law compliance. It is a hellacious thing to go through as an HR professional. So why not be that guide?
I love that.
That's awesome.
I had to look up, refresh the story for me, and 9 circles of hell. Is that right? How it goes? Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Each one worse than the next. Yep.
Wonderful. Thank you.
What was the worst for you in your HR career? What circle did you occupy?
Definitely employee relations. We're definitely going to go with that. There are quite a few investigations that were really emotionally draining.
Yeah. How many circles down was that?
Oh gosh, I would definitely say it's maybe in the 6 or 7
That's
range. Yeah. There have been some tough investigations to do.
That'll make you start your own business.
It did.
So we here at TestGenius, our roots come from HR consulting, and then we became an HR software company. And your roots are boots on the ground HR, and then you transitioned into a really successful business. Can you talk a little bit about what led to your vision and inevitably what led to you successfully executing that vision?
Oh, sure. So I've been in HR my whole career, working predominantly for high growth tech companies, both big and small. Although I dabbled a little bit in retail as well, which is where a lot of those ER issues came up.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a director of HR for a tech company maybe 10 or 12 years ago. And it was the first role where I had a multi-state workforce. And that was incredibly challenging because there's so many laws that you have to comply with. And they aren't just federal laws, they're state, they're city, they're county laws, as you well know. And it was really hard tracking and complying with all of these laws. I even had an Excel sheet where I'd get those SHRM emails that kind of notify you when a law's changed. And I would just fill out this Excel sheet and live off of that, which wasn't very scalable, I might add, especially because we were in so many states. But I thought there's got to be a better way of doing this. There's got to be some tech that can do it for us. And I'd conceptualized in my head how that tech would work, having worked at tech companies, but was a little intimidated about pulling the trigger, quitting my job, not paying myself for a couple of years. I had a young family, it just wasn't the time. And then several years passed and I was working for a very large technology company where we grew from myself. I was the first hire there in North America to about 1,000 people in 6 to 9 months, something like that, all across the US and Canada. And again, so hard tracking and complying with these laws. So a couple years later, I quit my job, started Virgil. This is now almost 5 years ago at this point, and started working with an engineering team offshore that built the first version of the product and still to this day continues to build the product for us, and had conceptualized what Gen AI would look like at the time 5 years ago before it was really the way that it is now.
Yeah.
Yes. And so we built the first prototype of the chatbot and then continued growing from there. So it's been really fun.
Fantastic.
Amazing. As you work with other HR professionals through Virgil HR, providing guidance, what are some of the biggest compliance issues that you find that people are just unaware of?
Oh gosh. Well, I think the fact that state and local laws can be more restrictive than federal laws. Many employers will build policies around federal requirements, but they don't always realize that a state or a city might have stricter rules for things like leave or pay or scheduling. I think another area is job descriptions. They can create compliance problems. Outdated job descriptions might not always accurately reflect essential functions, and that can create issues with hiring and accommodations and classification. And speaking of classification, I'd argue that's another one, right? Independent contractors aren't
Yeah.
necessarily independent contractors, right? Worker classifications often misunderstood, particularly as companies use freelancers or consultants or gig workers or even remote workers across multiple states.
Are there any compliance mistakes that surprise you?
Yes, I'd say the biggest surprise is often how frequently compliance problems come from inconsistency rather than bad intent. Yeah, I talk a lot about the fact that that company that's getting sued likely, not in all cases, but likely didn't have bad intent. There's probably inconsistently at play with the way that they were practicing. So a manager makes an exception, a recruiter uses a different hiring criterion, or an HR team applies a policy differently across locations, and suddenly you have a compliance issue.
Hmm. Now, you mentioned how laws are changing and how often they're the most restrictive at the city and the local levels. Because the employment laws are constantly changing at city, state, federal, how does your team keep up?
Oh gosh, we do it in a variety of ways. We use a couple really large legal databases to keep up. And we also use things like state websites. Our team will actually call state offices and request clarification on new laws that have been
Mm.
released. So it's really burdensome, but we have figured a scalable way of doing it.
Do you drill down to the city level? I know cities come up a couple times, but drill down that far in terms of the advice that you're giving?
Yes, we cover about 8,000 localities across the
Wow.
US. Mhm.
Amazing. Are there particular industries that you specialize in?
I think that's happened organically, just with time. Healthcare, construction, manufacturing, staffing, professional services. So we have some that are in that really kind of high risk arena, and others in the professional services space that generally they're not coming from that high risk area, but they might actually have a lot of remote workers, for example. So they're a complex multi state organization.
You had mentioned essential functions earlier, and I was curious. That comes up a lot in terms of ADA accommodation and physical ability testing a lot, which we don't do a lot of, but one of our sister companies does. Is there anything that Virgil HR does to help people to understand about essential functions, to be able to differentiate between essential and non-essential? Or is that something that you give guidance on? Or how does that come into play on your side if it does?
Yeah, so we do have an AI job description builder that helps with a lot of those requirements. And then we also provide a lot of guidance on ADA accommodations. So we have our chatbot, for example, where you can say, hey, I've got this employee requesting an accommodation in Tennessee. What do I do? And it covers not just the federal ADA requirements that you have to meet, and it even walks them through the interactive process and how that works and questions you should ask and stuff like that. We have forms and all that good stuff too, so you can really practice this.
That's
But we
great.
also cover any laws at a state or local level that are going to be relevant to what you're working on, again, as well from an accommodation perspective.
Excellent.
With all the big changes in the EEO, equal employment opportunity space, how has this affected your business and what you do?
It's affected us in the sense that we've had to be very diligent about tracking all of these changes that are occurring and really helping our customers understand the impact and what it means to them. I think that employers really shouldn't mistake reduced federal enforcement for reduced discrimination risk. So, Title VII and state and local laws, they still apply. So, HR leaders really need to navigate an increasingly fragmented compliance landscape particularly around areas like hiring, selection, compensation, and AI. So we do a lot of that education through our platform. And I know it's been quite helpful and successful for a lot of HR professionals using it.
I'm really glad to hear you say that because I'm really in the middle of the road on this one. And there's so many great aspects of EEO, and that it just seems like there's been this throw the baby out with the bathwater feeling about it. But to me, at the end of the day, on the testing side of things, and if you have a bad test and it's not valid, a plaintiff's attorney can come after you, and you've got to be able to explain why you did what, when, where, why, and how. And so I think it's really important. We have seen a lot, however, of organizations who have gone so far as to dismantle aspects of compliance. And that's going to make it hard for you folks because you're trying to adequately keep the foot on the gas and step on the brakes at the same time. Was that something that you've had to consciously try to balance?
Well, it's a really great question. I'd say it's less about balance and again, more about just education on the facts, right? We've seen, as you said, some companies dismantle these types of programs. And in some cases, it's because they've really had to with the change in our landscape today. In other cases, it's just because they're scared and they don't know what to do. So that's where we come in, is really helping them understand what's at risk for you and what isn't. So in addition to the chatbot, we also have the ability for our customers to speak to someone on our legal team, and they've done a phenomenal job of really helping people understand where that risk is
Hmm.
and what their risk tolerance. We're not telling them what their risk tolerance should look like so much as just giving them options of what that could look like.
Yeah, people like you and I, Jocelyn, we've been around for a couple decades. We've seen the pendulums just swing back and forth on different hot topics. And this one right here really feels like there's a foreswing and there's going to be a backswing that's going to come. And the more that people dismantle the knowledge that they have in place, and of course the staff that they have in place, that they stop counting, I just feel like people are setting themselves up for a real big issue. I don't know. Do you think about that strategically in terms of how do you try to advise people to not undercut their own strategic protection activities? Or is there any way that you get involved in that, or that factors into the decision making or the content that you put out?
No, we don't get involved with that too much because we're very careful about where we draw the line between guidance and advice.
Mm,
And we don't provide any type of legal advice to our customers. It's all general guidance. So, again, what we're offering is something that's really informational in nature and relatively neutral as well.
I see. Thank you.
Yeah.
TestGenius is in the pre-employment testing space. And I'm just curious, do you get questions from employers about pre-employment testing?
We do. We do get a little bit of questions about pre-employment testing. We get more questions around background checks, which is something totally different, of course. But pre-employment testing, really where we're getting questions is around discrimination and discriminatory risk that they need to be aware of. Less so from our bot, more so from questions that are asked to our legal team.
Mm.
But we do provide a lot of really helpful information to help them better understand where that risk might be.
Right, right. So let's pivot for just a second and talk again about AI. Actually, AI is the topic these days, isn't it?
It is.
So our approach is that we use AI as a tool to augment and not to replace humans.
Mhm.
And I kind of sense that you have that same philosophy with your AI chatbot. It's an extension of being Virgil, right? To as a guide. Can you talk more about how your software helps HR?
Absolutely, yeah. So we have a variety of features within our software. We have the chatbot, we have legal updates, the ability to speak to an attorney, our employee handbook builder, multi-state comparison tool. There's a lot there. And we use AI in our chatbot to really help, as you said, augment the day-to-day work they're doing. Something that drove me really nuts as an HR professional is I'd have something come up like first time I'm terminating somebody in California. And I'm going on Google, I'm reading through articles, I'm reading Wikipedia. Is this article most up to date? Who wrote it? Is it even accurate? Has something passed since this article was written? There's a lot there, and there's a lack of confidence in making that decision. And as an HR professional, that's really scary because you are left to make that decision in many cases without getting legal advice, and you're held to it, which is really uncomfortable. So what we're here to do is provide a tool that's going to surface that information to the top so you get it really quickly, but also provide information where our database is actually fully built by our in-house employment and labor law attorneys. So all the content that was developed, all the content that's maintained on a day-to-day basis is with our legal team. And so you can feel rest assured that when you're getting information within our platform, it's going to be accurate and it's going to be attorney backed, really attorney developed. So I think that sense of confidence makes it a whole lot easier for HR to move forward and do their job and just feel good about the decisions that they're making. But we aren't here to replace that compliance specialist. We're here to make their job a whole lot easier and help them be a whole lot more accurate in the decisions that they're making. It often isn't bad intent, it's bad practices that get companies into trouble. And so that's what we're looking to eliminate.
Oh, outstanding. Does your tool provide a citation, a source?
Yes, it does. So we provide citations with a hyperlink that goes directly back to the original legislation that we're using when we're developing that content. So it's all very robust. We also do link tracking on the back end. So if these links expire, we fix those as well to make sure that you always have the most up-to-date information.
Yeah, that's
Great.
fantastic.
Mhm. Yeah, it's not always perfect. Sometimes we'll miss a link here or there, but we
Sure.
catch it pretty quickly.
Sure. It's nice to be able to click that link and find the source and find that it is actually there.
Yes, it's a very relieving
Encouraging.
feeling.
Right?
Yeah.
Yes.
In my role as a leader of a small organization, one of the greatest points of stress that I have comes from a fear that people aren't all on the same page and heading the same direction. And I was perusing your website, and I noticed that you have a section that's entitled Standardization and Simplification of HR Workflows.
Mhm.
And that really resonated with me, the whole standardization and simplification, both. Can you talk a little bit how important these two aspects are, and how is it that Virgil helps out with these really important aspects?
Yes, absolutely. So, from a simplification perspective, we're taking what can sometimes be complex information that you'd find in a piece of legislation and summarizing it in a more palatable way for our day to day reader. And it's written not just for the HR professional in mind, but even for the business owner in mind as well. So, you don't have to be an HR expert to leverage the data that we're providing. Then, from a standardization perspective, we've talked a little bit about this when it comes to maintaining consistency. That's really important to make sure that you're consistently practicing compliance processes and procedures in the right way. And that when you can document it and you can show that level of consistency and standardization really helps you in things like lawsuits. But an example of the way that it would work is if I were to go back to that termination in California, I would engage with the bot and say, hey, I've got an employee in California that I'm terminating. What do I do? And it takes you through a full workflow with step-by-step instructions on everything you need to do to be compliant with each of those applicable laws. And it's applicable laws to that specific employee, not just generically. So if you were to go on ChatGPT, for example, and ask the same question, it'll give you a generic response on what one might do uh, for a random person. But what we're doing is saying, oh, this person is in LA County and there's this very specific form that needs to be provided. So
Right.
we're also going to include that form as part of the workflow as well.
That's really interesting. I know there are instances where the workflow might include some aspects, like, say, for instance, they haven't properly documented incidents that have occurred that have led up to this point. I would imagine that's a really important part of the software. Before you jump in there and you get on the phone with somebody, you get your ducks in a row.
Yeah. And that's why you'd go through these workflows. It's very unique compared to other chatbots out there. Other chatbots aren't asking these types of detailed questions about an employee. Like, for example, if you were asking about maternity leave requirements in Washington state, we're asking or we're pulling from your HRIS, depending on whether there's an integration. How many employees does the company have? Is it over 50 employees? Are there at least 50 employees within a 75-mile radius of this employee? Have they worked at least 1,250 hours? Those types of questions to identify whether or not FMLA is even relevant to this specific employee to begin with.
Wow. How are we doing on time, Jenny?
I think we're doing great. I think we should just keep going. We're on a
Okay.
roll here.
All
Yeah.
right.
Thank you.
Jocelyn, you game?
Yeah,
All right.
absolutely.
Excellent. Another benefit that you folks feature on your website is supporting confident people decisions. And that's what we're all about, specifically and solely on the recruitment side of things. But people decisions are made continuously through the employee journey. Can you speak a little bit about how Virgil HR also supports confident people decisions?
Yeah, so much of this revolves around our data and the fact that our data is very clean and it's been, again, developed and maintained by labor and employment attorneys. And it's something where we're not just covering federal, right? We're covering states, we're covering cities, we're covering counties, we're covering thousands of them. So if you have an employee in San Francisco that's requesting parental leave and you generically ask a question, hey, I've got this employee in California, what do I do? We're asking questions to determine whether PPLO is something that's going to be relevant to this individual. And once we've done that and we've identified what laws are applicable to the individual, how good does that feel as an HR practitioner to feel that sense of confidence in the decision that they're going to make because they're empowered with all of that information and all the tools that they need, like the forms, for example?
This may be a little specific, hopefully not too specific in terms of strategically where you're thinking. But again, in my role, I'm constantly thinking, what can we do with the product that we have? It seems as though right now, Virgil HR kind of exists as a silo within a person's workspace, and it's not literally connected with the data. But do you ever dream about what if it were connected and you're able to ask about Susan Smith in Paducah, and rather than having to provide that information, that maybe it's merged with an HRIS or an HRMS, and Virgil knows who we're talking about and maybe can reach out into different areas within the HRMS and gather internal information and mix it with, that might be a little bit too much 2001: A Space Odyssey, but do you ever think about things like that, aspects like that?
Yes. So we actually already do that. We have the
Okay.
capabilities of doing that today.
So I didn't invent that?
No, I'm sorry to say you didn't. No. So, for example, we actually built this out about 4 years ago, and we experimented with an HRIS uh, uh, sandbox, for example, where we were able to identify what the user was doing in the system. Oh, they're looking at a leave request, whose leave requests they're looking at, what that person's start date is. So it'll know have they've been with the organization at least 12 months, for example. Pull the location, how many employees are in that location across the organization, those types of things. So that we don't even have to ask some of those questions with our
Right.
bot. It automatically knows, okay, this person's qualified for X, Y, and Z. So we do that today.
Right.
What we are focused on right now from a strategic perspective is being more agentic. And I don't want to talk too much about that quite yet because we're not ready for it. But the idea here really is how can we automate compliance
Sure.
as proficiently and seamlessly as possible for our users?
Yeah, there's a whole host of aspects where now all of a sudden the bot is saying, "Oh, by the way, take a look at this or take a look at that," and proactively helping people into a state of compliance. So that's exciting. We'll look forward to having you on in a couple of years and talking a little bit more about the which I presume you'll call it the Mike Callen function, because I intest. But
Oh
that's
gosh. Well,
exciting. That's neat. That's really great technology.
Thank you. Yeah, something I'm really excited about with this is it's very proactive. So compliance is traditionally reactive, unfortunately. So this really allows users to be proactive. They don't even have to know a law exists when they're working on something to get that prompt from the chatbot.
Right, right. Yeah, that's yeah. You can start to see taglines on your website right now featuring that word proactive, because yeah, everything right now is just you're dragging everything through the process, and this is actually going out and getting them. So that's exciting. Very, very cool stuff. Let's see. It, are there any questions that you would have hoped that we would ask, or that have occurred in your brain that just, I'd really like to chat about this?
Mhm.
Yeah, you were very thorough. You covered quite a bit. So I appreciate that. And what I really appreciated was you going beyond what we're doing today and talking a bit more about what we're doing tomorrow. There are a lot of really exciting things that many vendors are working on today. And so for us, it's all about how do we differentiate ourselves in the
Yeah,
market, because AI has made it so much easier to meet competitor parity in a pretty quick fashion. And so how you keep that competitive advantage and that differentiation is really important.
isn't it incredible to be at a place like SHRM where you can have 6 or 7 football fields full of vendors and just walk the aisles and find organizations that are doing things that you never thought of before, or that might be tangential to what you're doing, but not truly competitive? I just marvel at that, and I think that's one of the great things about being able to assemble as 26,000 people in one building, is to be able to experience those kinds of things. I don't know
It's
that
really
that was really a
cool.
question
Oh,
and
no,
answer.
yeah. It's very cool. And before I started the company, I would go to those conferences just to walk the expo floor
Sure.
because I loved learning about the new technologies that were coming out, the new features, capabilities, the new companies, and they're popping up left, right, and center, which is really cool because it demands innovation across the rest of
Right.
the competitive landscape, which is really,
Yeah.
really important.
Yeah.
I've been quite fortunate because in going to those events, we've met a lot of partners. And actually, I don't know if we met you all at SHRM or not.
Well, we did connect at SHRM, but we had met ahead of that, so it was a scheduled meeting.
Yes. And exactly. It's like the perfect way of being able to meet potential partners in the space and just learning more about what everybody's doing. I would
Yeah.
highly encourage any HR practitioner to spend quite a bit of time on the expo floor because regardless of whether or not you're in a position to buy, it's going to teach you something.
Absolutely,
Mm.
absolutely. We go to these so many, we're doing 46 conferences this year, which is almost double what we've done in the past, and we're road weary, but most of them are really great experiences. Sometimes we're at a conference and we don't have good engagement at the booth, and it's always so sad to me because the point that you make about encouraging people to go and talk, my point is talk to the people who are literally underwriting your educational experience and find out who is doing so and who isn't doing so. And maybe some of the people that you as an employer are supporting aren't supporting you, and then their competitors are. But yeah, go walk the aisles and talk to us, because we're not there to sell anybody anything. We're not going to close any business in the 15 seconds that you're standing in our booth. We're just there to exchange information and share ideas. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. I wish every practitioner who was now working in the space where you used to work would really internalize that. That would be really helpful for all of us.
Yeah, and it really helps you when you're working through different projects that you're focused on and you're trying to figure out how can we be as streamlined as possible, as lean as possible,
Right.
as innovative as possible. How are you going to know unless you go talk to some of these vendors? You can do the research online, sure,
Yeah.
but you might miss out on some of the smaller companies that can't afford the same advertising budget that the bigger ones can. And some of those small companies might be a better fit for you for a number of reasons, whether it's price or innovation or anything else.
And even service types. Before Jeremiah from your organization reached out to me to have a conversation, I didn't know who your company was, and I didn't know of that particular aspect of service type. And so unless you go and you stop in front of somebody's booth and say, tell me a little bit about what it is that you do, I, for one, wouldn't have known that there was a service like Virgil HR's to help people with these compliance issues, and especially to help people in an arena that gets as complicated as it gets because of the geographic diversity. But at any rate, yeah, good food for thought. Hopefully people listen and take this seriously.
Jocelyn, if somebody is entering the HR field as a career choice for the first time, what kind of advice would you give them as they get started?
Oh gosh, I'd say don't just learn how to administer HR, learn how to understand the why behind the rules and the business. The best HR professionals know the law, they understand the technology, and can translate both into really practical decisions that help the business and protect its people. Never assume that because we've always done it this way is still the right way.
Very good. It has been an absolute pleasure to have you on our podcast today. And I just want to say that what you're building is brilliant.
Mhm.
And it's really, I can just see the need that it is filling, and truly a wise guide as people work through their HR struggles.
Thank you. That's what we're hoping for. And I really appreciate all the thoughtful questions too.
Thank you. So if
We just used a bot.
if
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
yeah, if someone wants to know more about Virgil HR, what's the best place? What should they do?
They can go to our website, VirgilHR.com, or they can reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Perfect. All right. Any closing comments, Mike?
No, just thanks for being here. It's really great to chat with you. We got the chance to chat with you shortly beforehand, and obviously we've been in discussions with some of the people that work for you, and it's been really great experience so far. But we do really appreciate you coming on board, and this is iron sharpens iron territory. The more that we can do to put in the pathway of people that are operating in the space that we're operating in, good quality information, and we can help them head the right direction and do things more effectively and efficiently. It's a win-win. And so I feel like this has been a really profitable opportunity for us, and hopefully everybody will appreciate it as well. So thank you very much for your time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you both.
All right. Thanks. Take care.
Thanks for tuning in to Testing 1 2 3, brought to you by TestGenius and Biddle Consulting Group. Visit our website at testgenius.com for more information.